Welcome back to The Rank. I'm John. And there are some movies where if you described the premise beforehand, you'd swear there was no chance it could possibly work. A talking raccoon, a tree with one line, a pro wrestler, and Andy from Parks and Rec. And somehow they pulled it off.
I am Groot!
So here we go, ranking the 12th MCU movies so far on The Rank. And most of them have done pretty well, but I have high hopes for this one. What I'd like to do first, though, is place you back in the time when this first came out. At this point, we've had 3 Iron Mans, 2 Thors, 2 Captain Americas, a Hulk that everyone forgot about, and an Avengers movie. This was the first time that Marvel was really testing its audience with a lesser-known IP in its canon. What's kind of cool is to think that Marvel at this point had built up such a reputation that most people generally thought this was going to be good, regardless of whether there was a talking raccoon or a living tree that could only say 3 words. And we think now that the main actors in it are household names, but at the time, Chris Pratt was just a goofy guy from Parks and Rec. Batista was a wrestler, which has its own value, but it certainly wasn't household. Zoe Saldana was probably the biggest name in the movie. At least that wasn't just a voice. And they chose to bring in Vin Diesel for him to say all of 5 words in the movie, and they brought in probably their most marketable star in Bradley Cooper to be the voice of a raccoon. I'm just saying, they took some swings here. Now, you would think that starting a brand new franchise like this, which is basically an unknown, they would want to start with a bang. Really show the audience what these new heroes are capable of. But instead, what they give us is a barely perceptible origin story of Star-Lord. They don't tease us action, they tease us emotion. It's a little bit of a daring endeavor. However, after this opening sequence to establish Peter Quill as a kid, we get to our first action sequence. And if going into this in 2014 you were worried that Chris Pratt wouldn't be a good action star, I think you got to feel better about it after this first sequence. He handles himself well against Jamon Hunsu and the Kree goons, but really the key is before that. We're establishing the charisma of the character and the actor himself as he gets several minutes of solo screen time. It all works. He's fun and playful, and then he ends up handling himself well in a fight. They also don't present him as unstable, but more as opportunistic, which goes into his character. He's more of a Han Solo type than he is a Thor or Captain America. So in addition to presenting Pratt as a leading man you'll enjoy watching, we've also got a soundtrack here that is just fantastic. The whole beginning is basically putting a big neon sign on the experience that's flashing fun in giant letters. This movie does something really well, arguably better than the Avengers did. It introduces a large cast with a lot of moving parts, and it doesn't really miss a beat. I mean, the Avengers had the advantage of all its main characters having movies beforehand, or at least most of them. These were all new characters to audiences. We learned that Peter Quill is part of a group called the Ravagers, that the Ravagers were the ones who abducted him from Earth, and that they were supposed to drop him off as cargo somewhere, but decided to keep him instead. And the Ravagers are a pretty large group as well. We also have to be introduced to the villain of the story, Ronan. His whole motivation is that he hates Xandar. Guess what? Another thing that we have to be introduced to. And that's a whole planet, basically. Ronan is Kree, and apparently the Kree have a long-standing feud with Xandar. And it seems that the Kree are the ones you generally are going to root against. And on top of all this, we're also introduced to Thanos' daughters, Nebula and Gamora, who have been lent to Ronan in an effort to find an orb, the same one that Peter Quill gets in the beginning. Said orb needs to be delivered to Thanos in exchange for Thanos wiping out all of Xandar for Ronan. So there's your motivation for the villain. But wait, there are more characters to introduce. We need to meet Rocket Raccoon and Groot. They're bounty hunters looking to extract the bounty on Quill that the Ravagers put on him. And then Gamora is going to meet Quill to try to steal the orb. Turns out, though, she's not acting on behalf of Thanos. She sees it as a way out from under him. All of their plans are dashed, though, when Xandarian police arrest them all for fighting in public. And amazingly, there's yet another main character that we have yet to introduce, and that's Drax. He's going to be in the prison with them called the Kiln, and will help them escape in exchange for a shot at killing Ronan. Holy shit! We've got arguably 8 main characters that audiences have no familiarity with, all with their own sub-stories and side quests. And they're all cohesively interwoven here in a way that makes you believe their stories can and should interconnect. That's impressive filmmaking. And with so much plot and world building happening, you would think it'd be epically long like Lord of the Rings, with probably the same serious tone to boot, right? Because you'd think you'd need to optimize screen time to keep everyone in the audience abreast of all the moving parts. Instead, what you get is one of my favorite things: economy in storytelling. They use single lines and moments to let you know where things are, and it doesn't take itself too seriously on top of that. All throughout the movie, everyone is having fun, and there are so many light moments that it keeps the audience feeling good as well as entertained. Now, I will say there are some moments where they undercut themselves with maybe a little too much humor, but it's honestly few and far between. We go from scene to scene in a whirlwind. Quill gets the orb on Morag, goes to Xandar to sell it, but the buyer refuses to be a part of it because he finds out that Ronan's involved, who also is flying through space on his ship, the Dark Aster, with Nebula and Gamora. As mentioned previously, Rocket, Groot, Gamora, and Quill all get arrested on Xandar and get sent to a prison in space called the Kiln, where they meet Drax, who wants to kill Gamora. They escape from the Kiln through some ingenious planning by Rocket and head to Gamora's orb buyer, who lives in Nowhere, which is the head of a dead Celestial. Now we meet the Collector, another character, which I actually wish we could have spent more time with. And I mean, saying all that, it's like, did we ever take a breath? But actually, this is the moment where we do take a breath. We get moments between Gamora and Quill, where she refuses to succumb to Quill's pelvic sorcery, and some fun times for the gang. Though we do see there's some tension between Rocket and Drax. But ultimately, though, we're going to get some exposition about what's inside the orb, an Infinity Stone. And this is the first mention of Infinity Stones in the MCU. And if you think about it, it's kind of incredible that Marvel entrusted that to this movie. All right, so it's not the first time that the Infinity Stones were mentioned, but it's the first time we get some real exposition about it. I mean, they basically explain the plot dynamic of the entire Infinity Saga in this movie. They must have really known that they had something special with this one, I guess. Now, that breath I was talking about, it doesn't last long thanks to Drax, who, in an incredibly stupid and dangerous drunken move, reaches out to Ronan to tell him where the orb is. The premise being that Drax will get a chance to fight him. Of course, that puts everyone in danger, and Ronan just kicks Drax's ass as if he was nothing. And on top of that, Ronan is able to walk away with the Power Stone, which was the stone that was in the orb. And he didn't know it was an Infinity Stone before, but now he's like, well, I can just destroy Xandar on my own, without Thanos' help. Yikes. Now, they do a good job of building stakes throughout the movie, and I love the way they pull the team together. Quill, Gamora, Rocket, Groot, and Drax team up with the Ravagers to take on Ronan. Now, they're trying to stop him from attacking Xandar, along with the help of the Xandarians, who reluctantly agree to team up with them as well. And this is a good opportunity to talk about the visuals of the movie, because as the Xandarians join the fight, they do this linking thing with their space/aircraft that forms a force field. Now, at first when I saw it, I was like, that is so damn cool, because visually, it's impressive. But once it fails and the Dark Aster breaks through, it becomes sort of clear that it's not maybe a great idea. Why, you may ask, is it not a great idea? Well, I would consider a maneuver where if it fails, you lose basically your entire military force as essentially a bad risk. And this is exactly what happens. Now, it's at the end where you see a moment that I was referring to earlier, where there was maybe a little too much humor. The whole dance-off scene feels almost too unserious for the moment. It is admittedly fun and funny, and it's a cool moment, but it also feels like, is it really a moment that would have given Ronan pause? But I was willing to go along with it because the movie at that point has earned it. And besides that, the point isn't the dance-off silliness. The point is the team coming together. First, in the touching moment between the Guardians as Groot saves them from the crash-landing Black Aster, and then as they all collectively save Quill from the Power Stone by coming together to share its power. Of course, that's not the end. Eventually, we're going to find out that Quill has some kind of ancient DNA running through him, which would establish why he was able to hold the Power Stone for as long as he did. And we end with the expectation of another adventure with the Guardians. Just a genuinely fun movie. But the best part for me was this was the first experience I got to have with my 7 and 5-year-old where they actually sat through an entire MCU movie with me. They tend to watch YouTube all the time and bristle at the idea of watching a movie, but they sat through this whole thing and thoroughly enjoyed it and are now wanting to watch the rest of the Marvel movies. So that's like a really fun experience for me. I get to kind of share something that I was really into when I was younger. Anyway, let's find out some of the behind the scenes info and the potent notables.
Potent notables.
As always, the potent notables start with the box office. Guardians of the Galaxy made $333.7 million domestically and $439.6 million internationally, for a worldwide total of $773.4 million, all against a budget of $170 million, which is a huge success, especially considering how risky this movie looked on paper. Again, a talking raccoon and a tree that says one sentence. That's a gamble. But speaking of the characters, the casting of this movie ended up being pretty incredible. James Gunn didn't originally think that Chris Pratt was right for Star-Lord at all. In fact, casting director Sarah Finn had loved Pratt's audition for Captain America years earlier and kept pushing for him, while Gunn was reportedly saying, no way, he's totally wrong. But after finally agreeing to see Pratt audition, Gunn said that within 10 seconds he turned to Finn and said he's the guy. And Pratt took the role incredibly seriously. Gunn joked that he liked his audition so much that he was willing to CGI a six-pack on him if necessary. But Pratt instead asked for 6 months to get into shape and lose 50 pounds, and he ended up losing 60. He also apparently stole the Star-Lord costume from set so he could visit sick children in hospitals dressed as the character. That's pretty cool. And Dave Bautista also took the role of Drax very seriously. When he found out he got the part, he reportedly broke down in tears because he was so excited to play a Marvel character. He even worked with an acting coach to prepare for the role. And the physical process of becoming Drax was brutal. Initially, it took 5 hours every day to apply all of the makeup and prosthetics. And Chris Pratt said Bautista would just stand there the whole time holding onto rails with tennis balls on them and never complained once. Eventually, they did get the process down to about 3 hours, but it still took another 90 minutes to remove everything. And interestingly, Djimon Hounsou originally auditioned for Drax, while Lee Pace auditioned for Star-Lord, and instead, both ended up playing villains in the movie. As for Rocket and Groot, a lot more work went into those performances than you might expect. Vin Diesel actually recorded Groot's lines in multiple languages, including Russian, Mandarin, Spanish, Portuguese, German, and French, so that international audiences could still hear Groot in Diesel's real voice. Diesel also said that playing Groot helped him emotionally during an incredibly difficult time in his life, following the death of Paul Walker. He described Groot as a character who celebrates life, and said the role helped him reconnect with people while grieving. Bradley Cooper, meanwhile, said that he was paid more for voicing Rocket than he made starring in both Silver Linings Playbook and The Hangover combined. So, Vince focused on the emotional aspect. Bradley Cooper's like, let's look at the bank account. Now, Rocket's comic book creator, Bill Mantlo, also got a meaningful moment connected to the movie. Now, Mantlo had suffered a devastating traffic accident in 1992 that left him permanently hospitalized. Before the movie released, Marvel and Disney arranged a private screening for him. And according to his family, he loved the adaptation. And Marvel also reportedly arranged compensation that would help ensure that Mantlo received proper long-term care for the rest of his life. And finally, one painful little filming story. During fight training, Chris Pratt and Zoe Saldana typically wore protective padding so they could actually hit each other during the choreography. But on the day they filmed one scene, Pratt didn't wear his protective gear and didn't tell Saldana because he didn't want her to hold back. So she kicked him square in the ribs at full force, dropping him immediately. And then Pratt said that the bruises lasted for the rest of filming. But those are all the potent notables. Let's find out how it did with the rank.
A rank.
And how could you not enjoy this movie? As evidenced by the ratings next to me here, I did as well. This is one of those perfect examples of a movie that doesn't belong nominated for Best Picture, but within its genre, it's one of the best. It takes a convoluted story and lays it out for you in a way that doesn't feel exposition heavy, but also doesn't take itself too seriously. We get so much MCU lore in this movie. We've got Ravagers. We've got the idea that a Marvel movie can exist almost entirely outside of Earth. We've got Kree and Xandarians. We've got Thanos and his daughters. We've got Rocket and Drax and Groot. I mean, there is so much packed into this movie. It's truly impressive how coherent they were able to make this movie. And on top of that, they took an untested leading man and put him in the lead and instantly made him a household name. For the people who watched Parks and Rec, we all knew how great he was. But what those same people forget was that show never did well in the ratings. It wasn't a universally popular show. Chris Pratt was still a relative unknown, though I do sort of miss knowing so little about him. Anyway, this movie doesn't miss a beat. We care about all the characters, we understand their motivations, and we want the good guys to win. And not in a generic, of course we want the good guys to win kind of way. We want them to win because we're genuinely rooting for them. And James Gunn is not just able to make you root for them, but create touching moments with them as well. But that leads me directly to the last category for me to fill in. my rank. And if you want to see a breakdown of my analysis for each category, that's going to be available on my Patreon page at patreon.com/therankpodcast. But I absolutely loved this movie. I loved it when I watched it 12 years ago, and I love it now. I don't know if it's my most rewatched Marvel movie, but it's up there. And I'll say it again, just how truly impressive it was, how much they weave together with this story. I gave it a 5. So that puts the total of Guardians of the Galaxy at a 45.15, which puts it in the top tier absolute masterpiece. I wasn't expecting this to come out as the best MCU movie, but here it is. Of the 12 MCU movies I've done so far, it's number 1. As far as the all-time action movie list, it's ranked 7th, just below The Fall Guy and just above Bullet Train. And you can check out the entire rankings on my website at therankpodcast.com. Also, if you're ranking with me, please leave your scores in the comments. But thanks for listening and or watching. Check out my other action movie ranking episodes or any of my other movie or sitcom ranking episodes on this channel. Remember to subscribe, comment, and like. And if you'd like to message me directly, you can email me at info or john@therankpodcast.com. I am Groot. This whole beginning is basically putting a big neon sign.
Cut!
This whole beginning is basically putting a big neon sign on the beginning of this. Experience.
Cut!
This whole beginning is basically putting a big neon sign that's flashing fun in giant letters. Damn it.
Cut!
Take 3.
The whole beginning is basically putting a big neon sign on the experience that's flashing fun in giant letters. Hey, I did it.
Took you an hour?